Alright, what's up everybody? It is the Dark Conservatarian, and I am back here with another episode of Strike Force News. And in today's episode, I'm going to be reviewing a little article that was actually shared in Barron's Discord server that I'm in, of where that there was there was a New York Times article shared of where that they want you to abandon basically all critical thinking. But before I get on to that, and some other news that I wanted to catch up on as well. Before I get to that, though, for anyone who may be watching now and in the near future, I have a bit of an announcement to make. This Saturday at about 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'm going to be debating a communist on economic principle. This is just some guy who just randomly shown up in Aspie's Discord server that I'm also in, and he's a little knowledge of it to anyone. So he's kind of lowly known, so he's no big figure, but all the same, I just thought I'd throw that out there. And I don't even know for absolute certain if it's going to happen, because for all I know, the person might end up having a last-minute schedule change. Although I'll give the benefit of the doubt for right now that maybe that's not going to happen. But last time that I tried to organize a debate with a leftist of any sorts, the leftist ended up having a schedule change to where that he couldn't do it. And now he cannot do it at all. It was one guy wanted to debate me on gun rights. But anyway, so with the formalities out of the way, as you can see, I have nobody joining me in the call as of yet. But still, the show must go on. So, this New York Times article, at least from the implications that I got, was edited sometime after it was originally posted. By the way, hello JC Armitage in the chat there. I do not know for absolute certain if it was edited in post and now they have like just some new addition right here. But nonetheless, the archive link was also shared along with the original article link in the Barron's Discord server, and I pre-read the archive link, but we're going to be reading the actual original link just so that we can like try to observe about how much it lines up with the archive link that I had pre-read a little bit earlier today. Mr. Merchant says, hello, why have it at 12? It's 12 p.m. Central Standard Time on Saturday. Why have it at 12? Because the guy is in Kenya, that's why. The guy is has a 9-hour time difference from me, so therefore I have to try to be flexible with his scheduling. And also, scheduling is not so much of a big deal for me personally when it comes to Saturdays. I mean, especially if people arrange some with me in the early afternoon of Saturdays. It's the evenings when I typically go out doing something with friends or whatever. But just typically my schedules are way wide open on Saturdays. Or at least pretty flexible anyways. Not way wide open, but flexible. Hello, Cat Chat in the chat. So anyway, getting on to the article. New York Times, don't go down the rabbit hole, as that is what they're terming it. Critical thinking, as we're taught to do it, isn't helping in the fight against misinformation. Seems pretty sus thus far. Just right off the bat when you go reading the title and the headliner right there, it seems real sus. Like New York Times is just wanting to get away with controlling the narrative and even outright lies for that matter. They don't want you to be engaging critical thinking into questioning of what is the credibility of this piece of information that you're actually reading, particularly from a mainstream media news site, which I think is the type of news media that New York Times is primarily defending here in this article. For an academic, Michael Caulfield has an odd request. Stop overthinking what you see online. Now, what do you define as overthinking? Because I can agree that overthinking can sometimes get ridiculous, but it ain't always the case. Like, if you go, reading into a statistic that goes talking about coronavirus deaths, let's say, for example, and you go start to question the validity of those numbers. Like, for example, how are those numbers being counted? And it just ultimately goes questioning, are the actual numbers of people dying explicitly and exclusively from coronavirus actually lower than what is being presented by the CDC or whatever. Because if you're talking about that kind of overthinking you want people to stop doing, well, no, go screw yourself, go fuck yourself. No, I'm gonna keep on questioning those types of stats and whatnot. And ain't nothing that you can do about it unless you like plant some chip on my head that controls my brain. But if you want to like go into things of overthinking, like somebody, for example, tries to just very simply give their own layman's or off the cuff definition of what ethics are, and then you just decide to say you're begging the question, well, then, yeah, that would be a case of overthinking being done wrong or overthinking going over the top. But nonetheless, just it's a ridiculous request that you're making just off the bat. Don't give them ideas, DarkCon, says Mr. Merchant. Oops, too late. We're all going to be part of the Borg collective now. Yo, what's up, Loudmouth? Yeah, it'll. I heard that it gives you brain cancer if you think too much, and uh, and the government has to protect the people from their own selves. Don't you know that? Mm-hmm. Always trust the government, mainstream news, all that. Sorry, what? Yes, indeed. Wait, Loudmouth is being silent. Shit. Properties. Uh, high definition. Wait, no. Thanks for the FYI there, Mr. Merchant. No, that's not it either. Da, 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 da. Say something, Loudmouth. Crap. Come on. Um, say something now. Oh, there it goes. Well,
Trust
that kind of
authority.
yeah, that kind of sucks because you came in there swinging with a whole bunch of sarcastic banter with me, and it was entertaining, and now everybody missed it. Well,
Well, I'll
shit.
try. I'll try to repeat it. I was basically. You ever seen the movie They Live from 1988?
No, I have not.
I highly recommend it. It's basically this New York Times article. If you put on those glasses and see, you'll just see a sign that says "Obey, don't question authority."
Yep.
And it kind of there's this guy gets these glasses that makes him see what the world's really like. He realizes that these aliens have kind of secretly conquered the earth. Like if he puts on the glasses and looks at an ad, like a sexual ad will say reproduce, or if he looks at an ad for like the police, it'll say don't question authority. And if he looks at a lot of people in high positions, you see that they're like grotesque aliens.
Yeah. So without the glasses, they look a whole lot more appealing than with the glasses. Hmm.
Right, like he sees the real world once he puts the glasses on. You see, there's like drones filling the sky and shit. It's actually a really good movie by John Carpenter.
But yeah, basically, me and Loudmouth are just going back and forth about how you should always trust the New York Times and the government. They would never do anything wrong. Anyway,
Yeah, the New York Times doesn't have a history of covering up genocides that they totally avoided talking about the Holocaust back in the 40s.
look at this Antifa LARPer, says Aircraft Sparky. Right. Uh, burn down Target. Uh, anyway.
No.
Continuing on with the article, though, Mr. Caulfield, a digital literacy expert at Washington State University, Vancouver, knows all too well that at this very moment, more people are fighting for the opportunity to lie to you than at perhaps any other point in human history. Would that include yourself, New York Times? Um, again, Nani. What do you mean, Cat Chat? What do you mean by Nani? As you said it twice in my live chat. Just a clarification. Um, Misinformation rides the greased algorithmic rails of powerful social media platforms and travels at velocities and in volumes that make it nearly impossible to stop. That alone makes information warfare an unfair fight for the average internet user. Um, that
People are
is
allowed to communicate with each other without the New York Times being able to censor you. Oh no!
right. I do not know what you mean by fight, New York Times. It's not like every single person who uses social media even technically has a dog in a fight when they go researching information. They just want to know the basic facts of whatever. I mean, yeah, but anyway. But Mr. Caulfield,
Okay.
yes. But Mr. Caulfield argues that the deck is stacked even further against us. Who is us? What do you mean by us? If you're talking about you liberals, well then I don't really see it that way. I mean, you got
The aliens, that you can see when you put on the glasses.
yeah.
The peasantry can't be rebelling with their nasty misinformation.
Assuming that if I was to grant the benefit of the doubt to everybody who believes in the voter fraud allegations, that they're all true, it seems that mainstream media, at least from what I'm seeing, anyways, is being fairly successful in their their own informational, or rather misinformational, if we were to assume so, warfare in trying to fight back against the voter fraud allegations and defend the legitimacy of the Biden election, for example. And by the way, again, that's a big fat if. That's not to say that I explicitly believe in all of the voter fraud allegations. So do not go screaming "cope" at me in the live chat. Any leftists watching? Anyway, that the way we're taught from a young age to evaluate and think critically about information is fundamentally flawed and out of step with the chaos of the current internet.
This article comes across like a dystopian one from like some movie, like something that villains in 1984 V for Vendetta or some shit would write.
Yeah, Ministry of Truth. Anybody?
This really is. This shit's insane. The New York Times is fucking despicable. Yeah, we can't. Yeah, don't question authority. Remember, and because everything the government tells you is completely true. Just like nothing happened on June 4th, 1989.
Right.
Because the government says it didn't happen.
Right. Trust China, everybody. Aircraft Sparky in the chat. There was voter fraud, most likely not enough to change the election, but fraud exists. Right. That's something that I definitely do believe is that there was fraud that exists, but I do not know if it was enough personally. Also,
yeah, that's kind of where I am too. I mean, I do think fraud happened. I just don't know if it would have made any difference. I haven't seen anything that's like definitive evidence it would have.
Also, Sparky in the chat. Also, take your copium and enjoy. Tasty. I feel so relieved. Anyway, we're taught that in order to protect ourselves from bad information, we need to deeply engage with the stuff that washes up in front of us. Mr. Caulfield told me recently. I mean, yeah, it's a good idea for you to be challenging, or at least to your best, anyways, to be challenging your opposition. I mean, what? Do you want people to start living in echo chambers? I mean, if people just keep themselves in echo chambers constantly, you are setting them up for weakness, for a higher potential that as soon as they do get exposed to their own opposition, they are not more likely to be able to resist. They're more likely to fall into whatever narrative that their opposition is trying to sell them.
Right. And then me bringing up the June 4th thing, honestly, it's not even that much of hyperbole, because if somebody like this had total control over the internet, they probably censor it to the extent China does.
Maybe.
This person has this very same authoritarian impulses, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Like he doesn't want anyone to be able to say anything that disagrees with his worldview or her worldview. I don't know.
Let me see who person is. It's a dude who wrote this article.
Okay, gotcha.
But yeah, I remember you saying a couple episodes back that Andrew Cuomo, you didn't realize of how reminiscent to the CCP and Jinping administration that his gubernatorial administration was. There's not only that, and the New York Times is apparently another one of his mouthpieces.
Right.
He suggested that the dominant mode of media literacy, if kids get taught any at all, is that you'll get imperfect information and then use reasoning to fix that somehow. But in reality, that strategy can completely backfire. I mean, yeah, there's a potential that'll backfire. No shit, Sherlock. That's the risk that you always take when you go engaging in debate. But
Wow, I can't believe somebody wrote that without any sarcasm or irony.
hmm,
Wow.
yeah, and I highly doubt that this is a satirical piece.
Yeah, is this a satirical piece? Is this like something that the Babylon Bee wrote? Or are you sure this is the New York fucking Times?
Yes. I mean, the title is up there.
Because some of these lines they come across like something the Babylon Bee would write as a parody.
You're not wrong. Aircraft Sparky says Andrew Cuomo for world dictator. He's killing it.
Yes.
More like he's killing them, and by them I mean all the old folks. In other words, resist the lure of rabbit holes, in part by reimagining media literacy for the internet hellscape we occupy. Reimagining? What the fuck do you mean by that? I mean, it's not like a person's imagination is going to change the status for which the internet actually is. Actually, in reality, is.
Reimagine and it feels so good.
It's often counterproductive to engage directly with content from an unknown source, and people can be led astray by false information. Well, this is where that you go, seeing if there's like any citations or anything of credibility to back up the claim being made by the random website or whatever.
And
I mean,
it has the whole TLDR line citation needed.
precisely. I mean, for example, there was an article. It was from some rather kooky looking Illuminati conspiracy theorist type of group or whatever. And this is like when I was researching into the Tom Hanks pedophilia allegations. And they did not really have anything to back up their sources. They were just asserting basically that he was that he's a pedophile, and they were like showing examples of him like I don't know, taking pictures of random bits of clothing that he finds on the side of the street. I mean, that's kind of weird, but that's not definitive proof that the guy has an urge, or even has, for that matter, diddled kids. And yet
that's a huge leap right there.
Yeah, and yet that article was making it out like that's evidence of such. I mean, this is where critical thinking comes into play right here. You don't just use critical thinking to try and go against the mainstream media narrative. You also use critical thinking to try and go against the alternative media narrative, whatever type of alternative media that we're talking about. Anyway, influenced by the research of Sam Weinberg, a professor at Stanford, and Sarah McGrew, an assistant professor at the University of Maryland, Mr. Caulfield argued that the best way to learn about a source of information is to leave it and look elsewhere, a concept called lateral reading. Let me read that again.
Actually, there's some truth to that. Like oftentimes, if I see a claim that seems fishy, I'll like try to look at like like a book that's making kind of out there claims. I'll try to like read the negative reviews first and see if they got like something that refutes it. You know, it's kind of like a good way of kind of sorting through bullshit, because sometimes someone who will post like a negative review or what have you will have like sources to show that the claims here are nonsense.
Mm-hmm. And Ivan sent in the chat there, if you don't like the aesthetic of the new aesthetic that I'm trying to go for with my blackout American flag, well then I'm sorry to disappoint you, pal, but I personally am going for it. I mean, yeah, I'm just going for a new aesthetic as opposed to the peace that they got for the longest time.
The shot from Idiocracy in your thumbnail. That's awesome, because I fucking love that movie.
Oh, the thumbnail, right? It's just
thinking what for. That's brilliant, actually. Good one there too.
Mm-hmm. For instance, For instance, imagine you were to visit Stormfront, a white supremacist message board, to try to understand racist claims in order to debunk them. I mean, nothing wrong with that. Trying to research someone else's arguments and find out what your opposition's arguments are to try and go against them. Even if you see.
This is appeal to emotion fallacy right here. It's hoping that the audience will have an emotional reaction to a viewpoint that most of them hate, like white supremacy, and thus agree with this author's jacked up reasoning because of that. That's a really slimy debate tactic this guy's using.
Mm-hmm. Even if you see through the horrible rhetoric, at the end of the day, you gave that place however many minutes of your time. Is that a bad thing? Really, in of itself. I mean, as long as
well, what? I mean, their website doesn't have any ads. It's not like they make any money off of it. So, what does that? What does that matter?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's going to take time in order to try to counteract your own opposition. As long as the person reading Stormfront does not let themselves get manipulated by the rhetoric that is being preached by Stormfront, well then, no harm done. What's the big deal? Mr. Caulfield said, even with good intentions, you run the risk of misunderstanding something because Stormfront users are way better at propaganda than you. You won't get less.
Well, is this guy like praising white supremacists that they're like super brilliant propagandists?
I almost seems so.
Seems like he's giving these guys way too much credit. All right, most of these guys on these sites, most of them are idiots. And he's trying to make them out to be like that they're these brilliant manipulative tacticians. It's nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. You won't get less racist reading Stormfront critically, but you might be overloaded by information and overwhelmed. You know, this kind of reminds me of a quote that I think it was Stephen Michael Davis. Like, you know Stephen Michael Davis, right? Right, Loudmouth?
No.
Stephen, I mean, I thought I recall you mentioning his channel one time. It might be pronounced Stephen Michael Davis, but I always read it as
wait, I remember. Yeah, you're right.
Scuba
yeah.
Steve.
Anyway. Yeah, I remember him now. Now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, on his Twitter, he got posting a quote that was by Destiny of where Destiny was talking about of how that if you know too much, it'll kind of depress you. There is a little bit of a point in that regards. If you know too much, you might just ultimately go thinking yourself into a sad state, emotional state, or whatever.
Yeah,
but that's not the angle that this person. That's not the angle that this person right here is going for. The angle that they're trying to go for is remain ignorant because you'll be a worthy pleb of our ideal society if you do that. If you remain dumb and don't critically think. You won't get less racist reading Stormfront critically, but you might be overloaded by information and overwhelmed. Yeah, I won't get if I was to like go watching a progressive voice video, for example, and I don't let his ideas influence me and whatnot. A conundrum in the chat. Anyway, what was I trying to say? If I was to go reading a progressive voice video, let's say, for example, but I don't let his ideas influence the way that I think or whatever, I'm not going to get any less sock dem-ish or whatever, but I just watch his stuff so that I can be able to turn somebody else less sock dem by making a response video to them, for example. All in the idea of spreading my non-social democrat ideas to everyone else. JC Armitage in the chat says, this urinalist, as they're nicknaming the journalist, just ironically made the tyranny of choice argument when he said that one might get overwhelmed by reading DS. DS, what do you mean by DS, JC Armitage?
You're not listening. Tyranny of choice, yes. Freedom is slavery, exactly.
Conundrum in the chat says he is supposed to be a ninja. That's why the ladies love him, the ninja look. He has been doing the five knuckle shuffle ever since this look and getting ladies as much as he plays Overwatch. Oh, God.
Yeah, yeah. This guy's argument, literally, though, is from the villains in an Orwell novel: "Ignorance is strength."
Yeah.
Stop quoting villains in Orwell novels unironically.
Our current information...
1984 was a warning. It was not meant to be a guidebook.
Precisely. Our current information crisis, Mr. Caulfield argues, is an attention crisis. The goal of disinformation is to capture attention, and critical thinking is deep attention. Excuse me, he wrote in 2018. I mean, what's the matter with that? You're trying so desperately to try and paint these almost objectively positive things as negative things. Critical thinking and giving somebody your deep, undivided attention or whatever, those aren't bad things. He wrote in 2018.
I can't get over this. This shit's insane.
Indeed. People learn to think critically by focusing on something and contemplating it deeply, to follow the information's logic and the inconsistencies. Yeah? That natural human mindset is a liability in an attention economy. It allows grip.
No, it isn't. It's exactly what you need to get through an attention economy. It's exactly what's needed to filter out reality from bullshit. No.
Amen.
Wrong.
Amen, loudmouth. Preach. It allows grifters, conspiracy theorists, trolls, and savvy attention hijackers to take advantage of us and steal our focus. Whenever you give your attention to a bad actor, you allow them to steal your attention from better treatments of an issue and give them the opportunity to warp your perspective, Mr. Caulfield wrote. Here's my question to you. I mean, were they critically thinking? Are you sure that they were actually critically thinking when they started to fall into the mindset of, putting up the OK symbol? That is 666 sign actually right there. And that is a sign that somebody is part of the Illuminati. Let's just say for an arbitrary example. Are you sure that it's because of critical thinking why they started to fall more into that pessimistic, paranoid, and even stupid mindset? Or is it because of a lack of critical thinking skills as to why that they just bought into those stupid fringe mindsets, hook, line, and sinker? I would argue that it is the latter. Not the former, the latter.
Well, I definitely see this guy at least practices what he preaches. He preaches against critical thinking, and I can definitely see he's practicing that mindset of avoiding critical thinking.
Yeah. Mr. Merchant says in the chat, I want to now see what Loudmouth said in animation form. Somebody make that into a little skit. Loudmouth goes berserk on George Orwellian propagandists.
Yeah. Wrong.
One way to combat this, maybe we can talk cat chat into possibly doing something like that, Mr. Merchant. Might be something to talk about in the Discord server, just as an idea. Anyway, one way to combat this dynamic is to change how we teach media literacy. Internet users need to learn that our attention is a scarce commodity that is to be spent wisely. I mean,
what universe is this guy living in? Well, the people spend every moment of their time wisely. You know how much time people waste in their lives doing nothing?
Right. Exactly. Maybe they just aren't doing enough research to sift through as to what exactly the truth is and find out what the truth is. Excuse me.
Time, why you punish me?
I will not say that attention is a scarce commodity. Time is a scarce commodity, though. Granted, not everybody has the time to go through hours and hours and hours of research because, well, being a statistician or even a journalist, for example, is not everybody's full-time job. Like, for example, I work a full-time job of doing delivery driving outside of what I do here on the live streams right now. I am just a layman when it comes to talking about the news, for example. Also, hello, Myth Cuddlefish in the chat. The Conundrum says, this guy who wrote this article makes me think that his parents never gave him enough praise in life. I don't know, perhaps. And what JC Armitage meant earlier by DS was Daily Stormer. Ah, I gotcha. Anyway, in 2016, Mr. Caulfield met Mr. Weinberg, who suggested modeling the process after the way professional fact checkers assess information. Professional fact checkers, quote unquote. Mr. Caulfield refined the practice into 4 simple principles. 1. Stop. 2. Investigate the source. 3. Find better coverage. 4. Trace claims, quotes, and media to the original context. This does not seem... Okay. What do you think, Loudmouth? This doesn't seem to be an anti-critical thinking type of saying right here. In fact, the
that's
logic...
That's pro-critical thinking. That's what I said to do. Don't accept a claim. All right, find out its sources, find out where the information came from, see if it's credible. Yeah, investigation. That literally is critical thinking.
Yeah, try to find out if what you read was actually true by reading other alternatives to that information and whatnot. And by the way, Cat Chat in the chat. For some reason, I thought you worked in construction at the Dark Conservatarian. No, I don't work in construction. I have said before that I do some emphasis on some welding, but it's only as a side gig or as a little side projects over at my full-time work. I don't do construction welding or anything else like that. No, it's delivery driving. But anyway, otherwise known as SIFT, as they're calling this. Mr. Caulfield walked me through the process using an Instagram post from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a prominent anti-vaccine activist, falsely alleging a link between the human papillomavirus vaccine and cancer. Quote, if this is not a claim where I have a depth of understanding, then I want to stop for a second and, before going further, just investigate the source, Mr. Caulfield said. He copied Mr. Kennedy's name in the Instagram post and popped it into Google. Look how fast this is, he told me as he counted the seconds out loud. In 15 seconds, he navigated to Wikipedia and scrolled through the introductory section of the page, highlighting with his cursor the last sentence, which reads that Mr. Kennedy is an anti-vaccine activist and a conspiracy theorist. I mean, I know that we get a bit of a red flag raised in our head when we go finding out that somebody is a conspiracy theorist, but that doesn't mean that the person is wrong in everything. And as a matter of fact, the whole label conspiracy theorist can be used as a bit of a it can be misused, that term is, just in the same way of calling somebody a racist.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Well, in terms of, I'm not a fan of the anti-vax movement. I'm a big supporter of vaccines. And I do think a lot of anti-vaxxers do spout absolute nonsense. But yeah, the thing about just labeling someone a conspiracy theorist, unless you can dismiss them, is kind of a dangerous mindset, because real conspiracies do happen. Watergate was a conspiracy. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln was a conspiracy. Real conspiracies actually do take place. You should not dismiss them all out of hand, but you should be skeptical of them.
Yeah. Is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. the best unbiased source of information about a vaccine? I'd argue no. And that's good enough to know we should probably just move on, he said. In other words, anybody who has been discredited by the general public, you should just dismiss them and not give them an absolute lick of attention, is what their logic here is.
There's some truth to that. If somebody, given that our attention is limited, thus if somebody is caught lying or spreading nonsense, it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf scenario. It's natural to disbelieve somebody who was incorrect or spouting BS before.
Yeah. There is a bit of truth to it. Like, by that logic, Fox News, for example, I know of how laughable they generally are, especially on all the opinions on the left. So generally, I won't go so much as reading them and relying on them. I will more of the time go to Washington Examiner than I'll go for Fox News. And by that same extent, I will not go for Washington Post to rely on their information. The only time I'll go to Washington Post is if I wanted a foil to respond to. But instead of Washington Post, if I wanted a somewhat left-ish leaning opinion that I can take with a grain of salt, I would go to The Hill instead, for example. He probed deeper into the method, but okay. And further extension of my point there, but that's not a critical thinking bit of logic right there. You're talking about who we should consider credible or not. I mean, trying to sift through of who is credible and who's not is part of critical thinking. Like, I do not know what your point is with all this. He probed deeper into the method to find better coverage by copying the main claim in Mr. Kennedy's post and pasting that into a Google search. The first two results came from agents Agence, or however you pronounce that, France Press's fact-check website, and the National Institutes of Health. His quick searches showed a pattern. Mr. Kennedy's claims were outside the consensus, a sign they were motivated by something other than science. Oh, God.
Not necessarily. Something being outside of consensus does not mean that it's motivated by something other than science. So that's a bit of nonsense reasoning right there.
Yeah, consensus, schmidsensus. I mean, whatever. The consensus supposedly is that single-payer health care is the best way to go as far as health care goes. So therefore, America should just, lock heels with the rest of the modern world. Go on.
Yeah, I am probably more likely to believe something if there's been like a huge number, if the overwhelming majority of scientists are in support of a position. But you shouldn't automatically dismiss things that are outside the consensus. The scientific method's supposed to say, okay, you say things that you have an idea that's different than the rest of the scientific community. Well, the burden of proof's on you. Like the whole idea of any scientific principle is that everything has to be falsifiable. If a principle isn't falsifiable or a theory can't be falsified, it's seen as not even wrong. There was a quote by Christopher Hitchens: "Claims made without evidence can be dismissed without evidence."
Precisely.
So there always has to be a chance you can prove something wrong for any idea to be scientific, and that includes like long proven ideas like, let's say, the Earth being a sphere. If you were to prove you can fall off the edge of the Earth, you disprove the spherical Earth hypothesis theory.
Yeah, and speaking of that and consensus, do you know what else was a consensus way back in the 1400s and before then even? The Earth was flat, and yet the consensus was challenged. And what? Sorry, what?
That's incorrect. The consensus of scientists in the 1400s was not that the Earth was flat. That's actually bad history right there.
But whatever medieval time frame it was of when the Earth's population generally thought the world was flat.
What I'm saying, medieval universities taught that the Earth was a sphere for thousands of years. The ancient Greeks knew the Earth was a sphere hundreds of years before the birth of Christ. So it's not true that the scientific consensus in the 1400s was that the Earth was flat.
I'm
sorry.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was incorrect.
Was there any time in which humanity thought that the Earth was flat?
I'm sure, like in tribal regions. Yeah, I mean, there's. I'm sure there probably most humans throughout history have thought the Earth was flat, but I'm saying the consensus of aristocrats in medieval Europe was that it was a sphere, though they did believe the sun orbited the Earth.
Okay, that was the other example that I was about to ask next, is the center of the solar system. What was also the consensus way back in medieval periods and beforehand was that the Earth was the center of the solar system and the sun was not. And the sun revolved around the Earth, not the Earth revolved around the sun. Yet the consensus was challenged, and now we are a better society for it.
Right, Copernicus in the 1500s. I forgot the exact year. He was the one who proposed that the Earth orbited the sun rather than the other way around. Then Galileo proved that fact with his telescope almost 100 years later.
The SIFT method, an instructional teaching unit, about 6 hours of classwork that accompanies it, has been picked up by dozens of universities across the country and in some Canadian high schools. What is potentially revolutionary about SIFT is that it focuses on making quick judgments. A SIFT fact check can and should take just 30, 60, 90 seconds to evaluate a piece of content. That's some lazy ass researching right there. If you're only putting like less than 2 minutes of time in order to try and research a claim, I mean, yeah, no,
Yeah, don't you have anything from current year? I mean, that was like a year and a half ago, man.
right? What was?
Uh,
Oh, okay, right. If somebody was to run across an article that was from 2015, is what you're meaning?
I was making a joke. I was making a joke referencing an earlier stream. I guess I don't know.
Oh, well, what stream was that? Because I don't recall
It was
that.
like a year and a half ago. I was. Never mind. Let's move on.
All right. The 4 steps are based on the premise that you often make a better decision with less information than you do with more. How much you want to
What?
laugh? Let me read.
What?
Let me read that again. The 4 steps are based on the premise that you often make a better decision with less information than you do with more. Yes, with less information, I'm able to be more efficient at what decision I should make with my car, on whether or not I should like take it to this dealership or that dealership, and ultimately take my car to be fixed by some scam artist who will rip me off out of my money.
Is he saying that more information on a topic is a bad thing?
That's what I heard implied here.
Oh, wow. Yeah. By this logic, let's see. Don't read an entire book; just read the Cliff Notes version.
Right.
Here, I'll sum up the entire Harry Potter story. Wizard boy attack. Sorry, a better example. I'll sum up the entire Star Wars trilogy. Farm boy escapes the farm, joins a terrorist cell, tries to kill his father, makes out with his sister, gets an award.
The whole mix out with his sister line, that just made it all the more disturbing and disgusting. But also funny.
There you go. You don't no need to watch the Star Wars movies. I've just described them in full.
Yes, exactly. Without providing the extra important context that ultimately Luke does not fully make out with his sister, you know. Anyway, also, spending 15 minutes to determine a single fact in order to decipher a tweet or piece of news coming from a source you've never seen before will often leave you more confused than you were before.
No, it's more confusing with the less information you have. Or more information helps you be less confused. It helps clarify things.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody was to try and ask the question or go researching about the solar system, for example, why is it that hardly any meteors hit Earth anymore nowadays? I mean, if you were to just go leaving yourself off with just that, then you're going to be confused. But if you research a little bit more into the solar system and go finding out that there is a much bigger planet out there called Jupiter that pulls in most of the meteors and asteroids so that Earth does ultimately not get hit by most of the debris that enters our solar system, you'll be less confused and find out as to why it is that we are not having hails of, stones being thrown at us from the sky, The question that we want students asking is this a good source for this purpose, or could I find something better relatively quickly? Mr. Caulfield said. I've seen it in the classroom where a student finds a great answer in 3 minutes, but then keeps going and ends up won over by bad information. Wesley Washington in the chat, newcomer, says, no, he's saying more information can be overwhelming, making it more difficult to be decisive. Well, I would kind of rewind back to the example that I put forth in regards of finding of who the best mechanic is to fix your car. I mean, with less information, you might end up that you might not get as good of a deal and get scammed out of, I don't know, $100 to $300 of your precious money when you could have gone for cheaper and even more efficient fix to your car if you just ended up just doing a little bit more research. Just as an arbitrary example, SIFT has its limits. It's designed for casual news consumers, not experts or those attempting to do deep research. Oh god. I mean, I don't know what to say for that. I mean, obviously people should be, if you do not have the time to be looking and researching into all these different claims, well then you should be possibly looking into different other people who do the critical thinking and the breakdown of information for you. Um, but I don't see as to how that critical thinking is really necessarily a bad thing. And really, yeah, if people do not have the time to do critical thinking, well, then they're not doing critical thinking at all. So your point seems moot at that point. A reporter working on an investigative story or trying to synthesize complex information will have to go deep. But for someone just trying to figure out a basic fact, it's helpful not to get bogged down. We've been trained to think that Googling or just checking one resource we trust is almost like cheating, he said. I mean, it kind of is. I mean, you're just setting yourself up for weakness in the grand scheme of the debate. But when people search Google, the best results may not always be first, but the good information is usually near the top. Yeah, let's rely all on Google's algorithm to provide us the best information. Nope.
That's the search with DuckDuckGo.
Yeah, that's what I try to do more nowadays. I use DuckDuckGo and Bing sometimes, although I think I even prefer DuckDuckGo over Bing. But even Bing gives me a wider variety of different information that I can look at than Google. But Google seems to be almost one-sided on almost everything that I try to search up on.
Oh yeah, this is absolute nonsense. Google has been shown numerous times to manipulate their algorithms in dishonest ways many times. So just relying on what comes up at the top of a Google search as being the best result is absolutely terrible advice and is a good way to stay ignorant.
Right. Often you see a pattern in the links of a consensus that's been formed, but deeper into the process, it often gets weirder. It's important to know when to stop. Jeez. If a person does not have time to go into further information, then automatically they will ultimately stop themselves. You don't have to tell them to stop. And what if they want to keep on looking into the claim? What if they have that time available? What if they want to apply that critical thinking to try to break down the information more and more? What's the harm in that ultimately? Are you afraid really of your own credibility being exposed as weak or a little to none, New York Times, by people trying to apply critical thinking to the claims that you make? If that's the case, well then fuck you, you spineless snakes. Christina Latham, an assistant political science professor at the University of Nevada, Reno, has seen the damage firsthand. While teaching an introductory class as a PhD student in 2015, she noticed her students had trouble vetting sources and distinguishing credible news from untrustworthy information. During one research assignment on the 2016 presidential race, multiple students cited a debunked claim from a satirical website claiming that Ben Carson, a candidate that year, had been endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan. Here's the thing, you idiots. That is an example of people not applying a critical thinking to where that it got them misinformation. And not because of critical thinking that they got misinformation. You just shot yourself in the foot by providing that example, New York Times. You fucking clowns.
Exactly.
Some of these students had never had somebody even talk to them about checking sources or looking for fake news. Well, maybe
then I think the teachers did a bad job of teaching them how to write a paper.
Precisely. She told me it was just uncritical acceptance or uncritical thinking, maybe, if it fit with the narrative in their head, or complete rejection if it didn't. Comparing the New York Times to snakes is a disservice. Yeah, perhaps it says Daniel Hempel in the live chat. Well, perhaps it is. I mean, it might be a little bit of a yeah. He actually goes reading my mind right here because he says to the snakes. Comparing the New York Times to snakes is a disservice. To the snakes. Yes, indeed. Because looking at my T-shirt right here, the Gadsden flag. Don't tread on me. Snakes did nothing wrong, particularly in that regard. But you know what I was meaning when I was calling these people snakes. They're more like, I guess if I was to call them anything, they're more like worms. A bunch of spineless worms. Anyway, Mr. Latham started teaching a SIFT-based media literacy unit in her political science classes because of the method's practical application. The unit is short, only 2 weeks long. Her students latch onto quick tricks like how to hover over a Twitter handle and see if the account looks legitimate or is a parody account or impersonation. Those are some dumb kids if you really have to teach something as basic as that to them. They learned how to reverse image search using Google to check if a photo had been doctored or if similar photos had been published by trusted news outlets. I will say that is a bit of information that I would like to know how, and I will agree and admit that that's not very common knowledge. A method to try and figure out as to whether or not a photo has been, photoshopped or not. Yeah. Or if similar photos have been published by trusted news outlets. Students were taught to identify claims in Facebook or Instagram posts and, with a few searches, decide, even if they're unsure of the veracity, whether the account seems to be a trustworthy guide or if they should look elsewhere. The goal isn't to make political judgments or to talk students out of a particular point of view. Bullshit. I want to call bullshit on that. Throughout this entire narrative right here, and even I would say to a certain extent within the class, I mean, if you're really going to be priding the class as some virtuous thing of how kids should not be applying as much critical thinking as they were beforehand, supposedly, well then bullshit. You are wanting these kids, and everyone else for that matter, to be believing in a mainstream narrative. Mainstream point of view on politics. But to try to get them to understand the context of a source of information and make decisions about its credibility. The course is not precious about overly academic sources either. The students are confused when I tell them to try and trace something down with a quick Wikipedia search because they've been told not to do it, she said. Not for research papers, but if you're trying to find out if a site is legitimate or if somebody has a history as a conspiracy theorist, and you show them how to follow the page's citations, it's quick and effective, which means it's more likely to be used.
Yeah, I remember being told back in school, yeah, you can't use Wikipedia as a source. I remember getting knocked down a few points by making that mistake a long time ago.
Yep.
Yeah, don't use Wikipedia as a source. Google Scholarly didn't really exist at the time, though, so it's harder to find scholarly sources.
Right. I mean, Wikipedia is fine if you're wanting to use them to try and figure out what the filmography history is of an actor, what movies they have acted in their entire acting career and whatnot, a little basic stuff like that. But for political information on whether or not this political figure is guilty of XYZ crime or whatnot, don't rely on Wikipedia. You can use them as a starting point, but then go immediately down to the citations.
Yep.
Plain and simple. As a journalist who can be a bit of a snob about research methods, it makes me anxious to type this advice. Use Wikipedia for quick guidance. Spend less time torturing yourself with complex primary sources. Well, screw you. I'm going to keep on using primary sources like Washington Examiner or Gallup or Pew or Fred USA or whatever that one. Bureau of Labor Statistics.
It's always fun when somebody makes a BS claim. You're like, that's a nice little claim there. It'd be a shame if somebody were to debunk it.
Precisely. A part of my brain hears this and reflexively worries these methods could be exploited by conspiracy theorists. But listening to Ms. Latham and Mr. Caulfield describe disinformation dynamics, it seems that snobs like me have it backward. Think about YouTube conspiracy theorists or many QAnon or anti-vaccine influencers. Their tactic, as Mr. Caulfield noted, is to flatter viewers while overloading them with 3-hour videos laced with debunked claims and pseudoscience, as well as legitimate information. I will say, like, looking at this bit of information and sort of rewinding to what I said earlier, if a person has time to be listening to 3-hour videos, well, then they have plenty of time to be looking at other different sources as well of information, rather than just those 3-hour kooky conspiracy theorist videos. The internet offers this illusion of explanatory depth, he said. Until 20 seconds ago, you never thought about, say, race and IQ, but now suddenly somebody is treating you like an expert. It's flattering your intellect, and so you engage, but you don't really stand a chance. What he described as a kind of informational hubris we have that is quite difficult to fight. But what SIFT and Mr. Caulfield's lessons seem to do is flatter their students in a different way, by reminding us our attention is precious. The goal of SIFT isn't to be the arbiter of truth, but to instill a reflex that asks if something is worth one's time and attention and to turn away if not. Because the method is less interested in political judgments. I mean, okay, here's the thing. That's fine. I mean, I've been proposing that throughout my entire time of reading this article. If something looks uncredible, well, then don't take it at face value. But that is part of critical thinking. That doesn't run against critical thinking. That runs part of it, in tangent with it. If you critically think about something, you're going to question the claim of something and whatnot. And see you later, Loudmouth, as he has just left a little bit ago. Because the method is less interested in political judgments, Mr. Caulfield and Ms. Latham noticed, students across the political spectrum are more likely to embrace it. By the end of the 2-week course, Ms. Latham said students are better at finding primary sources for research papers. In discussions, they're less likely to fall back on motivated reasoning. Students tend to be less defensive when confronted with a piece of information they disagree with. Even if their opinions on a broader issue don't change, a window is open that makes conversation possible, perhaps more promising. She has seen her students share the methods with family members who post dubious news stories online. It sounds so simple, but I think that teaching people how to check their news source by even a quick Wikipedia can have profound effects, she said. SIFT is not an antidote to misinformation. Poor media literacy is just one component of a broader problem that includes more culpable actors like politicians, platforms, and conspiracy peddlers. If powerful, influential people with the ability to command vast quantities of attention use that power to warp reality and platforms don't intervene, no mnemonic device can stop them. But SIFT may add a bit of friction into the system. Most important, it urges us to take the attention we have with SIFT and apply it to issues that matter to us. Right now, we are taking the scarcest, most valuable resource we have, our attention, and we're using it to try to repair the horribly broken information ecosystem, Mr. Caulfield said. We're throwing good money after bad. Our focus isn't free, and yet we're giving it away with every glance at a screen. But it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, the economics are in our favor. Demand for our attention is at an all-time high, and we control supply. It's time we increased our price. And that's the end of the article. And that's the scary part of the article by the New York Times right here. Demand for our attention is at an all-time high, and we control the supply. It's time we increased our price. So, in other words, control the masses, and it's time that we control information. And so forth. The New York Times is just coming off as real slimy, really wanting to just be the one-sided arbiter of truth, as according to George Orwell's 1984. Not the arbiter of truth, the ministry of truth is what I meant to say right there. Um, Wesley Washington in the chat says, "What's the point of critical thinking when the truth is continent? What's the point of critical thinking when the truth is incontinent for your own arguments?" What do you mean by incontinent? Do you mean to say inconsistent with your own arguments? Um, what's the point of critical thinking when the truth is inconsistent for your own arguments? Or I don't know. Wesley Washington, expound on what you mean by that in the live chat, as I'm a bit confused. Anyway, so sadly enough, Loudmouth kind of left a little bit too soon right now in this call. I'm gonna take this off right now. I mean, as much as I want to do the mask for a bit of an aesthetic, you know what? Maybe that's something that I will have to ask on my Discord server. Ask for people's opinions if they want me to stop going with the face mask as part of the aesthetic for my live show here, or even want me to go back to doing just the pea coat or whatever. I mean, me personally, I think that I look kind of badass with the blackout American flag mask on. I mean, it's just personally, anyways. For anybody who is currently listening, though, I guess I'll ask you 6 people watching right now, 5 to 6 people watching. Do you prefer me to go without the blackout American face mask, or do you not mind the blackout American face mask? Or do you prefer me to keep on wearing the blackout American face mask because you think my face is so ugly that I need to hide it? But Mr. Merchant is of the do whatever you want DarkCon, and so is JC Armitage. All right. But like I was saying, Loudmouth left a little bit too soon because we are getting into talking about Andrew Cuomo, as we talked about this story, or at least a story relating to this subject, anyways, a few episodes ago. And that is about Andrew Cuomo and the COVID-19 numbers from the deaths of old people within his state under his watch. Before we get into that, I guess I ought to just give one more comment about the New York Times article. I gotta say that the archive link almost seemed kind of pointless, honestly, because I did not see that many edits, or at least that many considerable edits, to where that looked like that they were trying to hide something or anything like that. But nonetheless, it's still a scary and rather sleazy article that New York Times has posted. So, more reason as to why we all should not really take the New York Times as that credible. Wesley Washington asks, I should ask is, what is your conclusion? What is critical thinking? If I had to give a layman's definition of what is critical thinking, that would be like thinking past the base level of information. When you go reading something, try to hold it under scrutiny. In other words, under scrutiny, and ask on whether or not, if the numbers seem to not line up, well then do not just take the numbers at face value. Go looking into them a little bit more. Let's say, for example, numbers when it comes to coronavirus, cost of this spending plan, that spending plan, the breakdown of crime statistics or economic statistics, etc., etc. Breakdown of polls, for example. I know that's not a comprehensible definition that I'm giving, but nonetheless, I would say that it's basically thinking past the base level. Anyway, so Washington Examiner. Andrew Cuomo squeezed by critics on left and right over New York coronavirus debacle. So not only do you have the right wing that is pretty much disapproving and disliking of Cuomo, but the left is starting to squeeze in on him too. Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo, once seen as a lock for a 4th term, is under fire from both the 4th term. He's on his 3rd term right now? Holy shit. The guy is a king. It truly is a political dynasty, like I said with Loudmouth a few episodes ago. Andrew Cuomo, trying to maintain that power. Holy cow. He's probably not going to see full justice, like get impeached or even see jail time or at least fines for his leadership of misdirecting of where old people are to be going as far as, the elderly home story and whatnot. But at least he is going to see his own ass get booted out of office, at least by the implication here from Washington Examiner is under fire from both sides of the political spectrum over his handling of COVID-19 in New York. Republican and Democratic state lawmakers in New York lashed out at the three-term New York governor after he claimed at a press conference Monday that the legislators were kept in the dark about a Department of Justice investigation into coronavirus-related nursing home deaths as a result of a breakdown in communication between the staff and members of the legislature. I don't think it's just a breakdown in communication. I think it's just Cuomo purely not giving a fuck and just trying to withhold his own political expediency. I mean, the fact that he was lying, basically, that his administration was withholding information of what the true numbers were of deaths from coronavirus within nursing homes, that seems to show some explicit malice on Cuomo's part. Cuomo also blamed the thousands of nursing home deaths on staff working at the homes, not his order that mandated COVID-positive patients to be moved into nursing homes with elderly residents. Wow. Trash. No one believes you, Democratic State Senator Jessica Ramos, who heads the Committee on Labor, responded to Cuomo. State Senator Gustavo Rivera also disputed claims by Cuomo that lawmakers' legislative staff were informed about the Justice Department's pause in responding to lawmakers' requests for nursing home data. Democratic Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie's communications director Mike Weiland stated Cuomo's office never informed their office about the DOJ inquiry either. But the governor's office reached out to staff and said they needed more time to supply information requested by the members. They were not asking for permission, and it wasn't a negotiation. It was merely a heads up. The criticism comes as Cuomo gears up for re-election in 2022, seeking a fourth term. He's trying to eclipse the tenure in office of his father, former Governor Mario Cuomo. Oh, God. It truly is a dynasty. Not only do you have one brother in political office in New York, in one of the most populated states in America, and the other brother who is like one of the main talking heads at one of the biggest news sites in America, basically defending, brother number one from criticism of other people. But you also have their dad, who is also formerly governor of New York. Holy cow, the Cuomo dynasty, everybody. It's a thing. JC Armitage says Cuomo more like Chomo, am I right? I guess so, JC. What does Chomo mean, by the way, if I may ask? I have a feeling that Chomo is a Spanish slur, but anyway. Wesley Washington says, if he is voted for, if that's what the people want, that's what they want. If the people really want more elderly people to die or more incidents along the similar lines of that, well, then I guess New York State is more fucked than I would have thought beforehand. But other than that, no, I would hope at least that would not be the case. You're in office of his father. In 1984, Democratic National Convention keynote speaker won the office in 1982 and held it for 12 years, but he lost re-election in the 1994 Republican wave to George Pataki at the time, a little-known state legislator. Now, Republicans in both houses of the legislature wanted Andrew Cuomo's powers reined in for several months and pushed for Democrats to take action this week. Senate officials are currently in talks over a potential bill. JC Armitage says it generally means douchebag. Okay, thanks for the clarification there, JC. Mr. Merchant says 1, citation needed, and 2, appeal to majority fallacy. Precisely, Mr. Merchant. JC Armitage says, hey, 1984, what a fitting year right there. Indeed, JC. Um, Assembly Minority Leader Will Barkley, a Republican, called on Cuomo to release the information that was ultimately given to federal authorities. If the federal Department of Justice occupied so much time and attention. Barkley added the State Department of Health has more than 5,000 professionals working for the agency. That would seem to be enough manpower to ensure requests are fulfilled in an efficient manner. Senate Minority Leader Robert Ort, a Republican, says Senate Republicans were also never notified about the DOJ inquiry into the nursing homes. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. That wouldn't surprise me with the divisiveness and partisanship that we have in this country nowadays. People want the truth, and the only way that can be provided is through investigations by the Department of Justice and the Attorney General, Ort said. 14 Democrats joined with Republicans in the New York State Senate to call for a removal of Cuomo's executive powers related to the pandemic before it expires at the end of April. Oh, fuck. You tell me that Cuomo was running on executive fiat this entire time ever since the beginning of the lockdowns? I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I must have not been paying attention to that little ditty of information right there. Anyway, their numbers are enough to give a majority by 2 votes. But Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins has not signaled support for such an action presently. All hail King Cuomo, am I right, folks? Cousins, however, released a statement about the governor's actions last Friday, after news broke that Cuomo's press secretary told New York Democrats that the administration hid the true number of COVID-19 deaths in nursing homes from the public due to the DOJ inquiry that the administration was under at that time. Crucial information should never be withheld from entities that are empowered to pursue oversight. This was always about getting the truth and allowing information to guide our response, Cousins said. That is why we have multiple hearings and another hearing scheduled for this month, and why we requested this information in the first place. Several Democratic Assembly members stepped forward last Friday to question Cuomo's performance, including Assemblyman Angelo Santabarbara and Assemblywoman Carrie Warner. The governor withheld information from the legislature for months, and when we tried to exert oversight powers, he simply ignored us. That's not transparency, it's secrecy, Santabarbara said. According to one Albany staffer, though, while a handful of Assembly Democrats such as Santabarbara and Warner are individually vocal about the issue, their numbers are not currently enough to form a majority with the lower chamber's Republican members. End of article. Yeah, I'm glad that this is happening. That Cuomo is ultimately seeing a little bit more pushback. Yeah, screw him. I mean, I did not like Cuomo for a while now, but the lockdowns have made me disliking of him even more, and even more so my disliking of him because of how he tried to hide the numbers for how many nursing home deaths there were from COVID-19. JC Armitage says, yeah, that's pretty much how all these governors operated during this scamdemic. I guess so, JC. I mean, I know that Laura Kelly here in my state, she tried to act like a freaking monarch to shut down churches at the heat of it. I'm glad that we're out of the heat of it, so now that I can try to boost back up my social life, for crying out loud, and ultimately not be resorted to home as much as I would not want to be. So continuing on with news that I meant to get to last episode of Strike Force, this is from cnsnews.com. CDC, largest increase in drug overdose deaths March through May of 2020 when widespread COVID restrictions occurred. Yeah. You guys might have heard it. I mean, I know that I certainly came across those articles or those arguments from all the pro-lockdown people, or at least one of them anyways. Some of the more pro-lockdown people, they were saying that the deaths from COVID-19 are not being overcounted. In fact, they're being undercounted. There's all these mystery deaths that are happening in the wake of the coronavirus. And because everybody is stuck at home and whatnot, and therefore the government is not able to track the cause of every single one of these mystery deaths that are happening during the lockdowns and coronavirus and whatnot. So therefore, we can conclude that most, if not all, of these mystery deaths are from the scary Wu flu. Oh, the horror. Except I've been consistently pressing X to doubt on that front. I mean, I, for one, thought that it might have been suicide, for example. But not only is it suicide, it's drug overdose, to explain partially of what the mystery deaths are. That's not an undercounting of COVID-19 deaths, but in fact, yeah, just getting into it though. A health advisory released by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in mid-December revealed that the largest increase in drug overdose deaths in the United States occurred from March to May 2020, which coincided with the implementation of widespread mitigation measures for the COVID-19 pandemic, said the health agency. In its advisory, increase in fatal drug overdoses across the United States driven by synthetic opioids before and during the COVID-19 pandemic, the CDC said. It was alerting public health departments, healthcare professionals, first responders, and other medical experts about a concerning acceleration of the increase in drug overdose deaths, with the largest increase recorded from March 2020 to May 2020, coinciding with the implementation of widespread mitigation measures for the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah, and aside from mask mandates, that was one that it was a whole lot worse. Now, I just got a question, like, how current is this picture right here? Because, I mean, if there's a mask mandate going on, I wonder why is it that all these doctors and nurses aren't all wearing masks? The only person wearing a mask I see here is the one patient that's passed out right here. But anyway. But yeah, aside from the mask mandates, actually the mask mandates themselves have gone up while all the other mitigations, all the actual lockdown actions were more heavy-handed back, during that period of March through May of last year. Now it's just more mask mandates, less actual lockdown procedures. The advisory also warned about substantial increases in drug overdose deaths across the United States and the changing geographic distribution of overdose deaths involving synthetic opioids, with the largest percentage increases occurring in states in the western United States. The CDC reported that for the 12 months ending in May 2020, there had been 31,230 drug overdose deaths in the United States. This represents a worsening of the drug overdose epidemic in the United States and is the largest number of drug overdoses for a 12-month period ever recorded, said the CDC. The recent increase in drug overdose mortality began in 2019 and continues in 2020 prior to the declaration of the COVID-19 national emergency in the United States in March, said the health agency. The increases in drug overdose deaths appears to have accelerated during the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, yeah, people being forced to stay at home and whatnot and not able to go to as many fun activities as they wanted to. So how else are they going to get their activities done? How else are they going to get that euphoric high? Do some drugs, man, apparently. To be specific, the CDC reported the largest monthly increases in drug overdose deaths occurred in the 12 months ending in February 2020, 74,185 deaths, and the 12 months ending in March 2020, 75,696 deaths, to the 12 months ending in April 2020, 77,842 deaths, and from the 12 months ending in April 2020, 77,842 deaths, to the 12 months ending in May 2020, 81,230 deaths. Now, if that goes over you guys' heads, it kind of goes over mine as well. Just the weird terminologies and way of measuring the deaths and the time frames within that those deaths fall within. But anyway, These 1 month increases of 2,146 deaths and 3,388 deaths, respectively, for the 12-month periods are the largest monthly increases documented since provisional 12-month estimates began to be calculated in January 2015, said the agency. In other words, the largest increases in overdose deaths occurred in the 12-month periods ending in February, March, April, and May 2020. The U.S. government started to implement health safety precautions because of the COVID pandemic in February 2020. The Trump administration declared a public health emergency because of COVID on January 31st, 2020, and a national emergency on March 13th, 2020. End of article. And that was from February 16th, 2021. By the way, folks, just a little FYI. Wesley Washington in the chat says, elder care in this country is trash. If they had free health care, this would not have happened. This is like saying, why didn't you put out the fire when the government doesn't allow free water? How does this tie into single-payer health care, honestly? I mean, it's not because of a lack of health care beforehand as to why that they died. It's because of an incompetent government official, that being Cuomo more specifically, and all of his underlings, directing on where exactly the older people are to be, thus, for lack of better wording, forcing them to be infected almost with the mishandling and whatnot. Exposing the the people who are positive to the people who were negative beforehand. Infectious disease expert says wearing 2 masks. I mean, free healthcare or not, they would have still got infected, and likely even a good chunk of them, good majority of them, died anyways. Infectious disease expert, this is from Washington Examiner. Infectious disease expert says wearing 2 masks could enhance ability to get infected by COVID-19. Now, this is from January 31st, 2021. This is a bit of an old article, so it's more in the heat of when that people were starting to recommend that 2 masks. Maybe you should start wearing 2 face masks and not just 1. Y'all might have heard of that bit of ridiculousness, and just as people just laughing more than anything. But aside from the people thinking that people are going over the top, there's a little bit more of a substantive argument behind it, and so let's go looking into it. And in fact, an infectious disease expert says wearing 2 face masks may increase the chances of getting infected by COVID-19. It's kind of ironic, actually, isn't it? Michael Osterholm, who was a member of the Biden Transition COVID-19 Advisory Board, gave a second opinion after Dr. Anthony Fauci said last week that doubling up on face masks likely, quote unquote, provides more protection than wearing just 1 mask. When we talk about double masking, remember what we're really talking about is just trying to prevent the virus from being excreted by me into the air or me inhaling the virus from someone else in the air, and it's both a function of face fit and face filtration, Osterholm said during an interview Sunday on NBC's Meet the Press. The director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota compared face masks to swim goggles, noting that leaks usually happen at the fit rather than at the lens. So what we're concerned about is that many of these face cloth coverings do have already compromised fit or filtration capacity. If you add on another mask, you may actually make it tougher for the air to move through the 2 cloth area. And then at that point, it causes more air to actually leak around the sides, which actually enhances your ability to get infected, Osterholm said. I'm not saying that some couldn't be used in a better way, but at the same time, there are many that you may do more harm, Osterholm added. Let me just say right now, one thing that's really, to me, very important is we see up to 25% of people who wear it under their nose. You know, that's like fixing 3 of the 5 screen doors in your submarine. You know what's going on there? We've got to get people to start using these right. That would help right there tremendously. I mean, I'm not exactly a big-time pro-masker myself. Like, I'm against the mandates themselves, at least. As far as advising other people to wear masks or not, I say go ahead, advise it all you want. But and in some cases, I might even encourage it if I was to go looking into it deeper. But I just don't care about if whether or not a person chooses to wear it or not in the ultimatum of things. I overall just don't care. What I more care about is the mandates themselves. But if I was to give the benefit of the doubt to the pro-masking side and whatnot, then it would make more sense to be telling these people to wear it correctly than to tell them to wear 2 masks. It's ridiculous and it's over the top. It's silly. And it's a lack of prioritization. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention advises that people should wear masks in public settings, at events and gatherings, and anywhere they will be around other people. The agency also advises that the masks have 2 or more layers of breathable fabric, but it has not sent out guidance on wearing 2 masks. Excuse me. Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and President Biden's chief medical advisor, spoke on Monday about how masks are a physical covering that helps to prevent respiratory droplets from spreading. So if you have a physical covering with 1 layer, you put another layer on. It just makes common sense that it likely would be more effective, and that's the reason why you see people either double masking or doing a version of an N95, Fauci said on the Today Show. Oh, God. Common sense. That word gets thrown around too much. Yeah, and while at it, why don't we just advocate for common sense gun control? No. I mean, it's just saying that it's common sense does not help convince a person any more than beforehand. Sorry. The CDC does not recommend that the general public wear N95 respirators to protect themselves from respiratory diseases, including the coronavirus, noting that they and surgical masks are intended for healthcare workers. Late on Friday, the CDC issued an order effectively Tuesday that says masks are required on planes, buses, trains, and other forms of public transportation traveling into, within, or out of the United States and in U.S. transportation hubs such as airports and stations. End of that article. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's not the absolutely strongest case against double masking, but it's still, but then again, Fauci's argument for double masking is not very strong either. But anyway. So reading up on the chat a little bit more, JC Armitage says, I'm going to go watch the Hoppian debate that's happening right now. See ya. Hoppian debate. I guess you're referring to, there's another debate on back alley philosophy, JC? But anyway, see you later, JC. Wesley Washington says, if they had more resources, they would not have been put in the position to put the overflow in nursing homes. They shouldn't have put the overflow in nursing homes in the first place. This is not a sufficient refutation, Wesley. NSSF, the Firearm Industry Trade Association. This is an article that was, where was it? I think it was Discord, actually. That I came across this article. And you can tell by the title that there might be a little bit of a bias here. But just by looking at the title, I was thinking to myself, oh, I gotta give at least a look at this. Bank of America sells out gun and ammo purchasers as potential criminals. Now, it ain't too surprising, honestly, for a private entity to have such partisan animosity towards people, of their opposition anyways. Wesley Washington asks, where could have they put them then? I don't know exactly, but the government officials should not have put them with other people that were infected. I mean, it would have been best if the government did not act in that regards at all. I don't know what the alternative circumstances would have been, but at least even if some people were to die with no action in that on that front from the government, at least it would have been death by a lack of action and not death by somebody else's action. A death because of someone else's action is worse than a death by a lack of someone else's action. That's what I'll say. Because If it's death by someone else's action, then there is a person to play at fault for that. But if it's death by a lack of action of somebody, well, then there is no real potential person at fault or criminal or whatever else we have, whatever the circumstance be, whatever the example be. So, Bank of America sells out gun and ammo purchasers as potential criminals by Larry Keene. Bank of America, it turns out, is selling out their customers who bought guns or ammunition to federal authorities as people who should be investigated for ties to the criminal acts witnessed on Capitol Hill on January 6th. Oh, God. Okay, I personally do not know much about this, but some of my co-hosts have been saying, said it on the last episode, or maybe it was 2 episodes ago of Strike Force, of where that barely anybody who actually invaded on the Capitol, that actually stepped on the the Capitol building grounds, were actually armed, and even then, not every single gun owner in America even agreed with the idea of storming the Capitol. So this is like the flimsiest of flimsy guilt by association fallacies. I mean, guilt by association is already a flimsy argumentation in of itself, but this is just making it even worse. Tucker Carlson of Fox News uncovered evidence. Oh, brother. You go citing Tucker Carlson, you're making me kind of on edge right here. But let's read more into this. Nonetheless, I'll bite. Uncovered evidence that Bank of America is turning over the private transaction records of its customers to federal investigators it believes need to be probed for extremism or even domestic terrorism. The chilling move by the second largest corporate bank in America with more than 60 million customers and $2.16 trillion in assets was this. 1. Customers confirmed as transacting either through bank account, debit card, or credit card purchases in Washington, D.C. between 1/5 and 1/6. 2. Purchases made for hotel, Airbnb, RSVPs in D.C., Virginia, and Maryland after 1/6. 3. Any purchase of weapons or at a weapons-related merchant between 1/7 and their upcoming suspected stay in D.C. area around Inauguration Day. I mean, on the second bit of criteria there, let's keep in mind that not every single person who was present at the protests in front of the Capitol building even participated in the storming of the building itself. I mean, not every... As much as we like to point fingers and blame the Capitol Hill rioters, stormers, or whatever for acting rather foolishly, not everybody that was present that day on the to protest the Stop the Steal stuff, or to protest in the name of Stop the Steal. Not all of them are responsible for this. It's just, I don't know. There's a massive overcorrection that people just keep on doing to where there's unnecessary collateral damage. Way unnecessary. 4. Airline-related purchases since January 6th. Did you notice number 3? Bank of America is vocally anti-gun, but this is crossing into secret lists, Big Brother sci-fi truth that is stranger than fiction territory. The bank's criteria included any purchase at gun store, but not just guns. If someone bought a t-shirt, baseball hat, or even trigger lock, that flagged their account for review. Who told who? Carlson reported that Bank of America identified 211 people and turned that information over to investigators without notifying those customers their private financial transaction data was being shared without their consent. Federal authorities interviewed at least one person, and that individual was cleared of any wrongdoing. Bank of America dodged Carlson when confronted with the allegations that it was singling out customers who made a purchase at a gun store. They said, "We don't comment on our communications with law enforcement. All banks have responsibilities under federal law to cooperate with law enforcement inquiries in full compliance with the law." Question: was law enforcement actually asking that you try that all gun owners and people who purchase anything along these lines around this time be taken in for questioning? That's probably a dumb question. They probably were ultimately. Law enforcement was probably asking for people that fall under that qualification. But I don't know. If that's the case, then both of them are ridiculous. You ought to start resisting against tyranny in this regard, right, Bank of America? I mean, you don't just go kissing the boot just for the sake of kissing the boot. By the boot, I mean the boot of government. However, compliance with the law, quote unquote, here is questionable at best. Bank of America didn't say that the FBI subpoenaed the information. They only said they cooperated, quote unquote. Carlson pointed out that banks are allowed under 12 U.S.C. 3403 to provide information that may be relevant to a possible violation of any statute or regulation. In Bank of America's estimation, visiting a gun store and buying any product, much less a firearm which is protected by the Second Amendment, is suspicious enough to put their customers on a secret watch list without their knowledge. Okay. Reading that again. In Bank of America's estimation, visiting a gun store and buying any product, much less a firearm, which is protected by the Second Amendment, is suspicious enough to put their customers on a secret watch list without their knowledge. I mean, what if a person was to buy a gun around the time of the Capitol Hill riots, in the name of trying to resist anybody who is of the same mindset as the Capitol Hill rioters? That, yes, we need to fight against daddy government right freaking now just because Trump got cheated or whatever Trumpist logic they want to trot out. Or what if somebody wants to buy a gun just to resist the backlash or the response from the government because of these other idiots who decided to act too soon on storming the Capitol, you know? The New York Post interviewed New York City's former top cop who blasted the decision to hand over private financial data. That's just not a good reason to hand over private information. If that's the way they do business now, then the people of this country really have something to worry about, said Bernard Carrick, a security consultant who headed the NYPD in 2000 and 2001. Another former law enforcement official called the move a fishing expedition. In a follow-up, Fox News' Mark Stein interviewed former federal prosecutor. Well, okay. I should probably listen to Mark Stein a little bit more often, but I have a little bit less of an issue with Mark Stein than I do with Tucker Carlson. When I got on listening to Mark Stein, I generally liked the way he talked and whatnot more than a little bit more than Tucker Carlson. Interviewed former federal prosecutor Francie Hakes, who noted Bank of America's response was peculiarly absent of any mention of search warrants, court orders, or subpoenas. Hakes noted that the Fourth Amendment protects against searched. I think that's a typo. I think they meant to type searches that aren't particularized, or when a judge signs off in order to search the records of a specific individual based on evidence. Financial information is highly private in this country and is given heightened protections, she added. Wesley Washington says it's a company. I'm sure they have a legal team that gave them a green light on this, or even a terms of service that allows them to flag any accounts, but I'd need to know more. Well, it's still scummy either way. I mean, if I was to give this article the benefit of the doubt, it's still scummy either way. Telegraph move, selling out your customers to Uncle Sam, you know. Telegraph move. So far, JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo haven't responded if they've conducted similar internal search efforts of customer information. Yet, this follows an anti-gun animus by Bank of America. In 2018, Bank of America announced they would end financial relationships with manufacturers of modern sporting rifles, which they erroneously called military-style rifle. The move followed a similar announcement by Citigroup, delving into private transactions and using big banks to approve of purchases. I'm getting tongue-tied. Excuse me, folks. Delving into private transactions and using big banks to approve of purchases isn't a new idea. In fact, this is the fulfillment of New York Times columnist Andrew Ross Sorkin's call for such action and who proposed the notion in 2017 and 2018. It was later parroted by Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke as a potential gun control program. Oh, brother, of course, Beto. Of course, Beto. It also shouldn't be surprising that big banks with anti-gun agendas are emboldened to violate their customers' privacy, turn them out, and label them as extremists and domestic terrorists. The Biden administration yanked the publication of the Fair Access Banking Rule by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. That gave banks the green light to continue to openly discriminate against firearm business, which is just a privatization with a wink and nod to continue the illegal Operation Choke Point that was begun under the Obama administration. It is no longer the Bank of America. It is a gun control cabal working to undermine American freedoms, label gun owners as criminals, and use their customers' money and information as the tools to get it done. Welcome to the Bank of Gun Control, America. Precisely. End of article. For shits and giggles, I'm going to just very quickly go searching up for an article, an alternative article that goes talking about this very same story. Bank of America sells out gun owners. Bank of America sells out gun and ammo buyers as potential criminals. Daily Caller. Bank of America sells out gun owners again. Still, truthaboutguns.com. Bank of America sells out gun and ammo purchasers as ... Ammoland.com. Bank of America sells out gun and ammo purchasers as ... Guns in the news. Gunguy.tv. Concealedpatriot.net. And SSF.org. GunsAmerica.com. GlobalWaveNews.com. Fox News, of course, Fox News. USAGunblog.com, WesternJournal.com. Second largest U.S. bank declares war on gun owners. Western Journal is like the only one that I'm getting from here that is not as explicitly biased, at least in the title of their news organization and whatnot. But let's keep on looking. Bank of America sells out gun owners. Again, number 5 by Brenda. So, blah, blah, blah. TMBmain.com. Never even heard of that. From the Trenches, worldproject.com, flipboard.com, flinttechzoom.com, texashuntingforum.com, foecpack.org, politics406.com, snopes.com, Bank of America gun sales. That's not exactly what I'm looking for, but anyway. U.S. gun lobby takes aim at gun-hating banks. City, both, blah, blah, blah. Bank of America shows why they are no friend of gun owners. LibertyConservativeNews.com. Might go back to the Reuters article right here that I just passed by. Banks discriminating against guns. Free market still works. NationalReview.com. Gun control groups report card on U.S. banks' firearms. New York Times. Blah. And that's a 2019 article anyway, so it's... probably not relevant to the same issue that we're talking about here. RecoilDaily.com, TheTruthAboutGuns.com, BankOfAmerica.com, RugerForum.com. Let's go looking very quickly at the Reuters article right here. When was it posted? May 18th, 2018. Nope, way too old. Not even talking about the same issue that we're talking about. WesternJournal.com. April 11th, 2018, the Western Journal. You know what? I'm just going to leave it right there. Probably just call it an episode. I cannot find anything that does not seem to show an almost explicit bias at the time in regards of this story about, freaking Bank of America selling out gun owners. The only sources that we seem to have on that is from explicit pro-gun groups. Now, I'm not going to say explicitly that it's not true. In fact, I think it may damn well likely be true, especially since there's no counter narrative being challenged against these. I'm just kind of on edge about the fact that they cite Tucker Carlson of all people. I mean, couldn't you have cited some other organization like a local news site or something else like that? I don't know. Wesley Washington says, if someone is anti-gun, that they're right. It's possible, but unlikely to remove the right to own guns from the Constitution. Well, that's not quite what we're on about, but anyway, I'm just gonna leave that chat comment there. But anyway, thank you all for watching of one that you did, especially when we were reading the New York Times article. I wish that more people would have given a like to the live stream. Giving a like to the videos and live streams of your content creators, that really helps in the algorithm to boost up, how many people see it and whatnot. But unfortunately, that was not the case for this episode of Strike Force. I'm going to have to find some new formula to try and boost up the algorithm of my episodes somehow. But this next Friday, I think I might have a surefire subject that is definitely going to get at least the next episode of Strike Force a little bit more well viewed than this episode was, and the last few episodes too, for that matter. And even Saturday, for that matter. Saturday is going to be a debate, and Friday, I'm going to leave that as a bit of a surprise as to what the subject is and what I'm going to be doing for the very next episode of Strike Force. But yes, again, to reiterate to everybody, Saturday, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'm going to be debating a communist on economic principle. Capitalism versus communism, in other words. This is a little debate got sparked in one of the Discord chats, and I was all like, I'm just going to exploit this opportunity to take it on a live stream. Content for the channel. And yeah, so again, thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode, and see you later.